topic was opioid use and abuse in America by myself, Ed Marlette, and I swear. So our research question ended up being, how do clinical and illegal opioids affect American society? We decided that clinical and illegal opioids are inflicting damage upon American society ethically, socially, and politically. So a little bit of background on the subject. The opioid epidemic has started in the 90s when pharmaceutical companies assured the medical community that addiction was unlikely because, of course, they would not be prescribed any drugs if they knew that the addiction rate was so high. Consequently, increased prescription rates led to misuse of prescription and synthetic opioids, that's illegal, and legal opioids. And then public health officials have called the current opioid crisis the worst drug crisis in American history. So, a few factoids here. 130 plus people have died every day from opioid-related drug overdoses. And 11.4 people misuse prescription opioids, which this will be a main focus in our presentation, talking about how prescription opioids are a gateway to other illegal opioids such as heroin.
Through the social lens, we see how opioids affect society. For those of you who do not know, neonatal abstinence syndrome is a syndrome that is diagnosed throughout a baby's life. And they are diagnosed due to mothers who are pregnant, and when they are pregnant, they use or abuse opioids. This establishes a lot of traumatic events throughout a child's life, such as depression, their whole life, anxiety, and other traumatic effects. One quote shows between 1999 and 2013, the proportion of infants with neonatal abstinence syndrome, in other words, NAS, surged from 1.5 in 1,000 to 6 in 1,000. This shows that continuously, every year, more and more children are being afflicted with this disease. And they're not given a choice. They are born and they have to deal with these events for the rest of their life. This chart shows, again, that every year, more and more children are being diagnosed, and it is skyrocketed. Every single year, more and more are being increased with opioid addictions being born from their mothers. Not only babies, but teenagers, sons, and daughters are being affected as well. In some circumstances, high school students. For parties, high school students ravage through their medicine cabinets and take out drugs not knowing what they are to take these parties and pass them around. And in some instances, they are opioids. They are abusing, getting other children addicted, and this is resulting in many catastrophe deaths. Such as, during rallies, families listed names of those who died from a 50-page list of teenagers, your brothers, your sisters, your daughters, everyone. Families are losing loved ones because of opioids. One man from Seattle states that painkillers have helped give him some quality of life, while simultaneously sacrificing other parts of his life. This shows that yes, opioids help. Opioids can help you relieve pain and other parts of chronic stress going on in your life, but at the same time, opioids take away. So yes, they can help, but they also do so much damage to your life. Some regulations that we have are instilling policies on pregnancies that deal with opioid addiction, such as creating policies that limit the amount of opioids that someone can use before getting pregnant and during pregnancy to stop the babies from developing these symptoms early on. Another would be instilling policies for doctors to regulate lower amounts of opioids to avoid teenage catastrophe. This would be doctors just limiting the amount of opioids that they're giving out to stop this catastrophe again. Now for my colleague Gavin on the ethical lens.
At the center of the opioid debate is the ethical dilemma. Are the medical benefits of opioids worth the consequence of addiction? To answer this, we must first understand the consequences. As you can see here, 80% of heroin users initially begin abusing prescription opioids. The connection between a medicinal opioid and addiction lies in prescription. Addiction occurs because the patient forms a reliance on the drug after using it regularly and consistently. This becomes problematic when the dosage is now removed and the prescription stops. This can cause withdrawal when the patient could pursue that drug illegally. As you can see on this chart, the green line represents opioid sales and the red line represents opioid deaths. As opioid sales increase, opioid deaths fall off. So to answer the question, are the medical benefits of opioids worth the consequences of addiction? No. Some solutions to this could be regulating opioids before the prescription starts. One example of this is using the lowest possible dosage. lowest possible dosage is a way of ensuring physicians don't prescribe more and higher doses of opioids than needed. Immediate release opioids, which are opioids that have effects that last shorter times, could also help reduce the chance of withdrawal. Also, opioids could be replaced in some situations with non-addictive painkillers. However, these solutions have limitations. For example, the lowest possible dosage might not be that effective because most physicians don't prescribe higher doses that are needed. Also, immediate release opioids could cause problems because more higher doses of that drug could be required to prevent withdrawal. And also, non-addictive painkillers like IV ibuprofen aren't as strong as opioids. Now, my colleague Cam will talk about the political implications of opioids.
So as I threw out an earlier stat at you, with the 1.1 million Americans dying every year, to put it further into perspective, in 2016, 13.3 U.S. citizens for every 100,000 died each year. That's the size of a city, so every year you would be losing 13 of your citizens. As you can see from this infographic, there are different regulations on when opioids can be given out. For the purple region over here, that's 14 days, for example, but the light green, they have direction or authorization from the government. States have enacted regulation, as we can see, from the different colors. But there are no set federal nationwide laws, which is why you see a differentiation in between states as to when you can get your opioids or when you can renew your prescription. So, opioids, as Gavin has demonstrated, are a gateway to illegal activities such as doctor shopping. Part of the U.S. government's responsibility is to try to prevent or take care of crime. And doctor shopping is illegal. Doctor shopping is when a patient is addicted to opioids or they need more opioids for whatever use, whether to sell them or to use them. And so they go doctor shopping, which is when you don't go to your single doctor, you go to another doctor and then act as if you need more opioids, which again are either used to abuse them or they're used to be sold for illegal money. 80% of heroin users first misuse prescription opioids, according to the Federal Register. This is, again, demonstrative of the fact how you can start legally taking prescription opioids for chronic pain or other uses, but it can lead you into a life of crime, or even doctor shopping, and addiction. Another function of the U.S. government is to regulate the economy or try to keep it at a healthy state. $78.5 billion in taxpayer dollars, that is, have been spent combating the opioid crisis. Most people would find this as a way to say you should be spending those dollars elsewhere. But they're necessary dollars in order to pay for law enforcement and other needs as it pertains to the opioid crisis. So if more is done to combat the opioid crisis, this price would then go down exponentially. So solutions that the U.S. government can implement. The U.S. government needs to implement new nationwide restrictions upon opioids because, as you saw by the earlier infographic, there's an extreme amount of differentiation between the state laws and even cities sometimes, and this contributes to just complete disorder and chaos, and you can go from one state to the next and get opioid, and that's a surefire way to get addicted. Another solution is further funding into the war on drugs with the newfound economic leeway, because if you are combating this crisis, you will then have the $78.5 billion I spoke of earlier. You will have at least part of that money coming back into your economy. You can then use that newfound money to combat this crisis as you have. So the summary of all of our solutions. This leans more towards what Max says. We can just implement overarching policies for every one of our lenses that we spoke of. So the government, which was my one, could then put forth policies that deny pregnant women opioids so kids are not born with NAS or other disorders or addictions and afflictions that they have not asked for because they're just not being birthed into the world. As well, new regulation that regulates opioid use by requiring physicians to use the lowest possible dosage or non-addictive painkillers. So Gavin had previously mentioned ibuprofen. This is an extremely strong version of ibuprofen. which is great for pain management, just as opioids are, which is why they are so extremely addictive. But ibuprofen is not nearly as addictive as prescription or illegal opioids are. There's our work site.
Okay, a few questions for you. Max, I'm going to start with you. Give one specific way that your thinking has changed as a result of learning about Gavin's findings.
Gavin was ethical and I was social, and Gavin helped me progress my information tremendously because ethical and social kind of compare in certain ways, and he gave a lot of more first-hand evidence of people who were going through certain situations dealing with opioids, and this allowed me to almost benefit my slides by contributing and using all of his first-hand experiences in my slides to really show different perspectives, such as my one perspective from the man from Seattle, showing how simultaneously it takes away and gives him different parts of life. Gavin kind of boosted me to go more towards that side of things.
Okay, thank you. Gavin, in what way did you improve your ability to work with a group as a result of this project?
Because of this project, I really learned that it's better to start organizing yourself as a group early on, so that way when you actually combine and make the presentation, you're sort of on the same page. I felt like my lens ended up just fitting really well into Cam's governmental lens, because my regulation I wanted to introduce would be by the government, so being able to understand Cam's lens early on helped a lot.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Cam, what was the strongest counter-argument to the solution or conclusion that your team identified, and then why?
So our solutions were a blending of all three of our lenses, Gavin, ethical, and social, and me, government. And so the overarching solution was the government is going to instill policies to solve problems for the other two lenses. The main counter-argument was obviously there are already patients that are being prescribed opioids, and what are you supposed to do with them? Because they could already be quote hooked or addicted, and that's how they get their pain fix, even if they're not just taking part in illegal activities as of late. But our counter argument to that was we did a lot of research on alternatives. We even looked at marijuana as a option for pain management. But we finally came across ibuprofen, which is what we had earlier stated. It is, again, an extremely strong version of ibuprofen, but it is not addictive at all, which is the opposite of opioids. Opioids are extremely strong, but they are also extremely addictive, which is why we had been chose that.
Okay.